In this lecture, we'll be studying about operating system services. So we know that an operating system provides an environment for the execution of programs, and it also provides certain services to programs and to the users of those programs. So in this lecture, we will be seeing what are the services that is provided by the operating system to the programs and to the users of programs. Alright, so let's see. So the first one is the user interface. Now this is one of the most important services that is provided by the operating system. Now what is this user interface? The user interface is something that allows the user to interact with the operating system or to interact with the computer itself. Almost all operating systems have a user interface, and this user interface can take several forms, like the command line interface, also known as CLI, or the graphical user interface known as the GUI. Now examples of command line interface are like your command prompt that you have in Microsoft Windows or the terminal that you have in your Ubuntu based systems. So in this command line interface, what you do is you provide text based commands using your keyboard in order to perform certain tasks by the operating system. And then the most commonly used user interface is the graphical user interface or the GUI. So here what it is a interface where you have a Windows system with a pointing device like your mouse, and you have your menus and you can click those menus, or also you can provide inputs using your keyboard. So this is the most commonly used, and it is also the most user-friendly kind of user interface that we have. So this is the first and one of the most important services that is provided by the operating system. Now the next service that is provided by the operating system is program execution. Now we know what are programs and we know what are softwares. So the operating system must provide for the execution of the programs. That means you should be able to run or execute your programs and softwares that you have. The system must be able to load the program into memory, and it should be able to run that program. So this is also another very important service that should be provided by an operating system. Now the next service that is provided by an operating system is the I/O operations or the input-output operations. Now a running program that you have, it may require I/O, which may involve file or input-output devices. And this input-output operations should be provided by the operating system. And a user cannot directly control the input and output devices. Now you may think that when you are using your keyboard and mouse, you feel like you are controlling it by yourself directly, but there is the operating system in between you and your system that actually controls the usage of the I/O devices. So this I/O operation is also one of the most important operations that is provided by the operating system. So here I have shown you some examples of input devices like keyboard, mouse and other inputs, and here you have the output devices like your monitors, printers, speakers and so on. So you have your operating system which is in between you or in between the programs and the I/O devices, which helps in the usage of these I/O devices properly. So that is what we mean by I/O operations, which is also an important service provided by the operating system. Now the next service that is provided by the operating system is known as file system manipulation. So this is also an important service, and file system manipulation or file system management involves files. Now there are many files and directories in your system that has to be used. Now the operating system must control how these files are manipulated or how these files are managed. So sometimes you may have to create files, sometimes you may have to delete files, sometimes you may have to modify files, sometimes you may have to search for a given file. So all this is controlled by the operating system. And also it also controls the permission that is given to certain programs or users for the access of certain files. So all the files that you have cannot be allowed to be used by every programs or by every users. There is an access restriction. So these restrictions of access is also controlled by the operating system. So this is another important service that is provided by the operating system, which is file system manipulation. Now the next service that is provided by the operating system is communications. Now from the name itself, you may already understand what is communications. We already know what is communications, but in here what we mean is communication between processes. So in the last lecture I have already told you what is a process. So a program that is in execution is known as a process. Now, there are many processes that are present, and these processes often needs to communicate with each other so that they can synchronize with each other, and then their execution can be done in a efficient way. So there are many circumstances in which one process needs to exchange information with another process. So such communications may occur between processes that may be executing on the same computer, or between processes that are executing on different computers tied together by a computer network. So the processes that we have, it may be present between the same computer and they may have to communicate with each other, or you may be connected by a network, and in this network you are connected to different computers and there are different processes present in different computers. So the communication between these processes, between the same computers or even between the different computers, are controlled by the operating system. So this is one of the important service again that is provided by the operating system. Now the next service that is provided by the operating system is known as error detection. Now errors can always occur in the course of our computing, and the operating system needs to be constantly aware of possible errors that can occur. So there are many kinds of errors that can occur, like there are errors that can occur in the CPU, there are errors that can occur in the memory and hardware, or there can be errors in the input and output devices, and so on. So there are many kinds of error. So let me give you an example of error. Here I have a printer, and let's say that you are printing something and then suddenly your paper runs out. You are out of paper. Now the printer is not able to print because there is no more paper available. Now this is also an error, and the operating system must be able to handle this kind of error so that it ensures correct and consistent computing. Now what I mean by this is that when error occurs, your system must not just break down completely, and it should not just seize your computing ability completely. The operating system must have a way in which it manages those errors so that your computing is consistent and it is still carried on even if some errors are encountered. So error detection is a very important service that is provided by the operating system. And also sometimes you can have error correction or debugging. So this is also an important thing. If it can be provided by the operating system, will make your computing more efficient. Now the next service that is provided by the operating system is known as resource allocation. Now resource allocation means allocating resources to different processes or different users. Now what do we mean by resources? Resources can be of different types. It may be the CPU, it may be the files, it may be the input-output devices, it may be the main memory, and so on. There are so many resources that you have, and as I told you, there are many processes running in your system, and all these processes, they require certain resources at certain point of time. Now the operating system must help in resource allocation, means it should allocate the required resource to the processes which are waiting or which are asking for those resources, and it must allocate them in an efficient way such that all the processes gets the resources that they need, and no process keeps waiting for the resource and never gets it. We should not have a scenario where a process keeps waiting for a resource but it never gets it. And also we should not have a scenario where a resource is held by a particular process and it is never released. So the operating system must manage how these resources are allocated, and it should allocate in such a way that all the processes gets the resources that they need and the computing takes place in an efficient manner. Now this resource allocation is a very important topic as far as operating system is concerned, and we will be dealing with this in more detail in the course of this lecture series. Now the next service that is provided by an operating system is accounting. Now what we mean by accounting is that we want to keep track of which users use how much and what kind of computer resources. Now in the previous point I already told you what are computer resources. Now we want to know which user use how much and what kind of resources. And why is this required? This record keeping may be used for accounting or simply for accumulating usage statistics. So by keeping an account of this or by having a statistics of this usage, it can be a valuable tool for researchers who wish to reconfigure the system or to improve the computing services. So if you want to improve your computing services, you need to know how the resources are used and how it is actually working. So for this purpose, accounting is an important service. Now the next service provided by an operating system is protection and security. So from the name itself, we can understand what we mean by protection and security. So our data should be secure, and then everything that we do must be protected. Now we can talk of this protection and security in different ways. First of all, we can talk about it in the terms of processes. When processes or several different processes are executing at the same time, it should not be possible for one process to interfere with the others or with the operating system itself. So the processes should not interfere with each other's operation. And protection involves ensuring that all access to system resources is controlled. So we already know what are system resources. So protection means that the access to these system resources must be controlled. And talking about security, we can talk about security in terms of outside access. We should make sure that the system is not accessed from outsiders who are not allowed to access the system. So this is very common in our day-to-day life. When you use your computer systems or when you use your accounts like your email accounts or your social media accounts, you make your user ID and your password. And by doing that, what you are doing is you are protecting your account. You are authenticating yourself. So by providing the right password, you are authenticating yourself, and only if you have provided the right password, you can enter the system. And the security, it extends to defending your external input-output devices like modems and your network adapters and so on. So you should make sure that these are prevented from invalid access attempts. And if anybody is trying to access these devices without permission or in a wrong way, then these invalid access attempts must be recorded so that you can improve your system or you can have knowledge that someone is trying to break into your system. Now, if a system has to be protected and secure, then we have to take precaution from all the angles. That means throughout the system or throughout the entire system, we must ensure protection and security. So there is a saying which goes, a chain is only as strong as its weakest link. It means that even if you are having a strong chain with which you are trying to secure something, the strength of that chain depends upon its weakest link. So in the same way, even if you protect your entire system and you leave one area unprotected or one area not secure enough, so that may be the link through which your system may be vulnerable. So protection and security has to be implemented throughout the system. So those were the important system services provided by the operating system. So let us take a quick recap of all the points that we discussed. We discussed about user interface, program execution, input-output operations, file system manipulation, communications, error detections, resource allocation, accounting, protection, and security. So these are the operating system services that are mostly provided by every operating system that we have. So I hope this was clear to you. Thank you for watching and see you in the next one.